Welcome to today's deep dive.
Right.
We have an incredibly fascinating mission ahead of us today, honestly.
Yeah, we really do. It's a profound collection of material we're looking at.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a stack of sources today, and they range from like clinical psychology notes and research on human endurance, all the way to these deep philosophical essays on how the brain processes physical reality.
Right. And the goal here is to fundamentally reevaluate our cultural understanding of mental toughness. I mean, we're going to deconstruct how your brain actually builds the experience of discomfort.
Yeah, we're going to take the physical sensation of heat specifically and use it as a master key to unlock a completely different way of interacting with the world around you.
Exactly. We're exploring a framework where the goal isn't just, getting better at suffering, but actually learning how to stop generating that suffering altogether.
Okay, let's unpack this. We can ground it in a scenario that I think you listening to this right now will immediately recognize. So imagine stepping out of your front door right into the absolute sweltering peak of a summer afternoon.
Oh, yeah. You know that heavy, thick heat that just instantly hits you like a physical wall.
Right, like the kind where the air itself feels heavy in your lungs, and within seconds you can just feel the sun radiating on your skin.
And almost immediately, your brain likely does this automatic thing.
It generates two thoughts simultaneously, as if they are one single truth.
Right. So the first thought is, it is incredibly hot out here.
And the second thought is, this is unbearable, I am miserable, and I need to escape immediately.
Yeah. And for almost all of us, those two things, right, the physical temperature of the air and the profound misery we feel about it, they're completely fused together.
They're a package deal.
Yeah.
Like you can't have one without the other.
And society usually reinforces that fusion. I mean, we equate being mentally strong with the ability to endure that exact misery.
Right, we idolize the athlete or like the worker who can grit their teeth, suppress their panic, and just push through agonizing conditions.
But the authors of the research we're diving into today, they suggest our entire operating system is flawed. The paradigm shift they propose is that the physical reality of the heat and your internal misery about the heat are completely unrelated phenomena.
Which honestly sounds like a superpower. Like if we can separate the two, we aren't just learning how to endure more discomfort. We're reaching a state where the need to endure just vanishes.
It does. But to understand how we actually do that, we have to look at the mechanics of how we process physical reality. Because right now, our brains are running a very glitchy sequence when it comes to experiencing our environment.
A super glitchy sequence.
Yeah. And what's fascinating here is how the source text breaks down the evolutionary why behind that glitch.
Right, like why do we do this in the first place?
Exactly. If you think about early humans, they needed immediate aggressive motivation to avoid dying of exposure. So the brain evolved to fuse physical discomfort with psychological panic to, guarantee survival.
So normally when you step into that summer heat, your brain runs this lightning fast chain reaction.
Right. Heat leading to bodily discomfort, leading to subjective suffering, leading to a massive spike in cognitive friction, and finally a desperate urge to escape.
And because this cascade happens in like milliseconds, we assume feeling hot and suffering are the exact same biological event.
But the authors argue they aren't the same event at all. They separate this fused experience into four entirely distinct layers of reality.
Okay, so let's break those down. Layer one is just the external stimulus.
Yes, that's the temperature, the humidity, the UV rays hitting your skin. It is purely physical, objective data in the environment.
Right, it's just the numbers on the thermometer.
Exactly. Then layer two is the internal bodily change. This is your body's biological response to the data from layer one. Your core temperature begins to rise. Your sweat glands activate to cool the skin. Your heart rate increases to pump blood to the surface.
So again, this is purely biological. It's a mechanical response to physical data.
Purely biological, yes.
And this is exactly where things go completely off the rails for most of us. Because then we hit layer three.
Subjective suffering.
Right, the internal narrative. It's the voice in your head screaming, this is exhausting, this is unbearable, I hate this, and I want this experience to end right now.
Yeah. And finally, layer four is the behavioral decision you make based on all of this, the choice to either remain in the sun or walk back inside.
Okay, so the key insight from the text is that layer three, that subjective suffering, is entirely optional.
It is entirely optional. It is a psychological overlay. You can kind of think of it in terms of an alarm system.
Oh, I was just thinking about that. Like,
Yeah.
if you're in an office building and a fire starts, the smoke filling the room is layer one.
Mhm.
It's just the environmental stimulus.
Right.
And the loud, blaring emergency siren going off in the hallway. That is layer 2. That's your bodily state changing, your heart rate spiking, the sweat response doing its job to keep you cool.
And your body is supposed to do that. I mean, the siren is supposed to blare.
Exactly. But layer 3, that psychological suffering, that's the equivalent of choosing to sit down on the floor in the middle of the hallway, holding your ears and agonizing over how loud the siren is.
Yes. Instead of just using the information to calmly walk out of the building.
Right. The smoke and the siren don't automatically force you to sit on the floor in despair.
That captures the mechanics perfectly. I mean, it is hot and my heart is racing versus it is hot, my heart is racing, and I am suffering an unbearable tragedy.
Right.
They are fundamentally different human experiences.
Okay, I hear what you're saying about these 4 layers, but practically speaking, I have some pushback.
Sure, go ahead.
Because when I'm like sweating through my work shirt on a crowded, unair-conditioned subway in the middle of August, trying to tell myself this is just physical data feels like a cheap psychological trick.
It feels like denial.
Yeah, it feels like I'm just gaslighting myself into ignoring reality. How does anyone actually separate these in the moment?
Well, it is an incredibly difficult habit to break, precisely because the evolutionary wiring is so deep. But it isn't about gaslighting yourself or ignoring the sweat.
Okay, then what is it?
It's about observation. The research suggests that the moment you can objectively observe the physical sensation, literally noting my skin is damp, my heart is beating faster,
Right.
and doing that without immediately attaching the thought, and this is terrible, you create a microsecond of cognitive distance.
So you're acknowledging reality deeply rather than ignoring it.
Exactly.
But wait, if we successfully decouple these things, if we completely strip away the psychological discomfort, don't we lose our compass for what's actually good for us?
How do you mean?
Like, if I stop suffering in the heat, why wouldn't I just sit in a boiling sauna all day wearing a winter coat? Shouldn't someone who has mastered this just be totally indifferent to an air-conditioned room?
It's a logical leap to make for sure, but it relies on a misunderstanding of a key concept in the literature.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When the sources describe a state where everywhere feels the same, they are not suggesting that all environments become physically identical to your nervous system.
Okay, so a sauna and an AC room still feel different.
Vastly different. A sauna, a sweltering subway car, and a crisp air-conditioned living room carry vastly different physiological loads. Your body is working incredibly hard in the subway and resting in the living room.
So the physical siren is either blaring or it's turned off.
Yes. But what remains constant is the internal subjective state. Your mind stays smooth and relaxed regardless of how hard the body is working.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the text makes this brilliant distinction between comfort and suffering.
Right. They map them on entirely different scales.
Exactly. You can strongly prefer the air-conditioned room simply because it requires less physiological work from your biology. But you don't need the AC to prevent a psychological meltdown.
A great way to visualize this contrast, based on the case studies in the notes, is to look at a marathon runner versus an office worker.
Oh, this is a great example.
Right, so picture an elite marathon runner at mile 20. Their physiological load is massive. Their muscles are tearing, they're sweating profusely, their heart rate is soaring.
The siren is blaring at max volume.
Exactly. Yet internally, many report a state of absolute psychological peace. Zero suffering, despite massive physical stimulation.
And then compare that to an office worker. Like they're sitting in a perfectly climate-controlled room, 72 degrees, resting in an ergonomic chair.
Their physiological load is practically zero.
Right. But internally, they're agonizing over a spreadsheet, terrified of an upcoming performance review, just completely consumed by psychological suffering.
Yes, external comfort and internal suffering are independent variables. The goal isn't to lose your preference for a cool breeze. It's to lose your psychological dependency on that breeze to feel okay.
And once you realize that physical stimulation and mental suffering are disconnected like this framework starts bleeding into literally every other part of the human experience.
It really does. The sources we're looking at don't just stop at temperature.
Right. They apply this exact same lens to how we experience fatigue, how we experience boredom, and wildly, how we perceive the passage of time itself.
The implications are massive when you scale them up. Let's look at fatigue, for instance. Just as we separated the physical heat from the panic, we have to separate biological fatigue from subjective fatigue.
Okay, so biological fatigue is the measurable reality.
Right. Your muscles drain of glycogen, your sleep debt accumulates, your cellular energy drops. You cannot mind trick your way out of needing sleep or hydration.
Right. If you run out of gas, the car stops. You can't meditate a full gas tank.
Exactly. But subjective fatigue is the heavy psychological anchor we drop on top of that physical tiredness.
The narrative.
Yes, it is the internal narrative that says, I can't continue, I am failing, I hate feeling this heavy.
So when you strip away the internal suffering, you still acutely feel the biological limits, like your legs feel like lead, your eyelids are heavy.
But those sensations don't carry the crushing weight of despair. You perceive the low energy state, but it doesn't become a crisis of identity.
Which completely redefines how we look at boredom, too. The notes dive deeply into the psychology of boredom, particularly looking at the brain's dopamine expectation loops.
Yeah, that part is fascinating.
Because we typically think of boredom as just a lack of things happening,
Right.
low stimulation.
Right.
But the authors argue that low stimulation only becomes agonizing boredom when it collides with internal resistance.
It connects heavily to what neuroscientists call the default mode network in the brain. When we are understimulated, our brain starts searching for something to latch onto.
Right. It's seeking that dopamine hit.
Exactly. Without subjective suffering, low stimulation is just quietness.
Just peace.
But if you have an internal dissatisfaction with the present moment, that low stimulation becomes a desperate, agitated desire for things to be different.
Boredom isn't the absence of stimulus, it's the painful craving for a different reality.
Exactly.
I want to challenge you listening right now to think about this in your own life. Think about the last time you were stuck in a waiting room, maybe at the DMV or the doctor's office, and your phone died.
Ah, the worst feeling.
Right. You had zero external stimulation. Were you just peacefully existing in a low stimulation environment? Or were you vibrating with annoyance?
Running mental loops about how you should be somewhere else.
Checking the clock.
Yeah.
Actively creating internal tension by resisting the wait.
And that resistance, that cognitive friction, is exactly what alters our perception of time. The research points out that time only feels heavy and agonizingly slow when we are pushing against it.
We make time heavy through anticipation, through anxiety, and through this constant act of enduring.
Yes.
So it's like swimming against the current. The water itself isn't heavy, but fighting it is exhausting.
Precisely. If you have no desperate need for the current moment to end, time loses its friction. The minutes still pass, but they don't drag.
I love that concept. But I have to play the skeptic again here.
Hit me.
Because if we follow this logic all the way down, if I drop all subjective resistance, if I don't feel the misery of dehydration or the agonizing boredom of a waiting room, don't I just become a numb, unfeeling robot?
No, not at all.
I mean, what does this mean for our basic survival instincts? If you don't feel the misery of overheating, won't you just accidentally sit in the sun until you pass out?
It is a critical distinction to make, and the sources address this head-on. The absence of subjective suffering does not equal the disappearance of bodily perception or danger recognition.
So my survival systems remain fully intact.
Arguably even more effective because they aren't clouded by panic.
So you still know you are in trouble. You just aren't freaking out about it.
Absolutely. You still perceive the rising body temperature. You can fully recognize that your body's physiological state is crossing into a dangerous threshold.
Right.
And because your cognitive bandwidth isn't being consumed by a narrative of misery, you take highly efficient, appropriate action. You move into the shade, you drink water, you regulate your breathing.
That makes a lot of sense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about eliminating the middleman of panic.
The middleman of panic. I like that.
Yeah, instead of the sequence being stimulus, biological change, psychological terror, frantic scrambling, and then action.
Right, which is exhausting.
The sequence becomes incredibly clean. Environmental stimulus, biological perception, recognition of danger, appropriate action.
It is a direct, clear connection to reality without the unnecessary drama.
Exactly.
So from the outside, someone operating like this looks like they possess superhuman patience. They look like the ultimate stoic, someone with unfathomable mental toughness who can just endure absolutely anything you throw at them.
But internally, they aren't practicing endurance at all. Like, really? Yeah. They haven't spent their lives deliberately forcing themselves to tolerate agony. The entire structure of, I feel bad, but I will push through it anyway, simply does not exist for them.
Because the feeling bad, the subjective suffering part, has been dismantled.
The object of endurance is gone. They aren't enduring more than you. They simply no longer need to endure.
Which brings us to a really uncomfortable realization, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, if we as humans have the baseline neurological capacity to simply perceive stimuli without suffering, Why are we all so historically bad at it?
That's the million-dollar question.
What is it about modern life that makes us fuse these layers together so tightly? Because you hear this argument all the time, right? The natural lifestyle argument. People say, oh, modern humans are just soft. Air conditioning and memory foam mattresses have made us weak. We need to get back to nature and suffer a bit to rebuild our grit.
This raises an important question about how we diagnose the problems of modern living. The authors of the source text dismantle that crude claim about physical comfort making us weak very elegantly.
Because it's not just about the physical comfort.
Right. Physiologically speaking, there is truth to it. If you spend your entire life in 70-degree air conditioning, your body's biological heat acclimatization will be lower. You won't sweat as efficiently.
Sure.
But your physiological adaptation to heat and your subjective tolerance to psychological suffering are entirely separate mechanisms.
Right. Going back to the earlier point, you could be a rugged outdoor guide who is perfectly acclimatized to a 100-degree jungle, sweating efficiently, but still be absolutely miserable, irritable, and complaining the entire time.
Exactly. Physical toughness doesn't guarantee mental peace.
No, it doesn't.
So the problem isn't just that modern humans enjoy physical comfort or are separated from nature. The authors present a much more compelling argument.
Okay, what's the real villain?
The real villain is that our modern environments are perfectly engineered to generate chronic internal tension. It's what psychologists refer to as an elevated allostatic load.
This is where I started thinking about it like a computer's RAM.
Okay, yeah.
Look, think about the components of modern life, right? Constant connectivity, a relentless barrage of notifications, excessive information, constant social evaluation, economic anxiety.
It's endless.
Our brains are essentially running all these background apps that eat up 90% of our cognitive RAM.
And those aren't just neutral external stimuli. They are designed to trigger existential questions.
Right. A notification isn't just a beep.
No, it instantly triggers the default mode network to ask, what if I fail or am I falling behind?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we live inside this machine that forces us to constantly predict the future and evaluate our own worth.
Which keeps us locked in a permanent loop of cognitive tension.
Our baseline state is practically vibrating with background anxiety. So when a new app tries to open, say, the Heat app because it's a hot day, the system just crashes.
Because we are already carrying this massive psychological load, any additional physical stimulation feels like an unbearable attack.
We project our chronic internal suffering onto the external weather.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The external environment doesn't have to be completely sterile and controlled for your internal state to remain stable.
Right.
The stability comes from closing out those background apps, from reducing that massive engineered internal burden.
So what does this all mean for us today? We've taken the simple physical sensation of heat, and we've essentially used it to map out a completely new way of interacting with reality.
We really have.
We've seen how evolution fused physical data with panic to keep us alive, but how we now have the capacity to untangle them. Whether it's a sweltering summer day, the agonizing boredom of a waiting room, or the chronic stress of a modern office, the external environment does not have to dictate your internal peace.
And my final piece of advice for you, the listener, as you navigate your week, is to start practicing this separation.
Start small.
Exactly. The next time you find yourself in a highly uncomfortable environment, maybe you're stuck in awful traffic or it's uncomfortably hot or you're just physically exhausted, trying to actively isolate the layers.
Notice your heart rate. Notice the temperature.
Observe the physical data without judgment. And then see if you can catch the exact microsecond your brain tries to add the narrative of suffering on top of it.
Just observing that gap is the first step to dismantling the need to endure.
It truly is.
It changes how you view everything. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, building on all this fascinating source material.
Go for it.
If true resilience is actually the absence of suffering, what if our entire societal obsession with grit is fundamentally backwards? By constantly praising people who power through misery, and by aggressively celebrating those who white-knuckle their way through terrible conditions, are we actually reinforcing the very psychological suffering we should be learning to let go of?
Yeah.
Is what we call mental toughness really just a symptom of a completely untrained mind? Keep that in mind the next time you step out your front door into the sweltering heat and catch yourself thinking, I need to escape.